Kigali water crisis. Kagame's development model is being tested. For years, Rwanda has been marketed to the world as the Singapore of Africa. Clean streets, luxury hotels, modern conference centres, new stadiums, international sporting events, and the words "Visit Rwanda" displayed through partnerships with some of Europe's biggest football clubs. But today, in Kigali itself, Rwanda's own water utility is rationing water. Think about that. In the capital of the country, presented as one of Africa's greatest development success stories, some residents have to follow a schedule to know when water may reach their neighborhoods. So today, I want to ask a very simple question. What is the value of impressive buildings, expensive international branding, and luxury infrastructure if ordinary people still struggle to obtain something as basic as water? This is Rwanda Digest. And today, we are looking beyond the beautiful images of Kigali to examine what Rwanda's water shortages tell us about the development priorities of Paul Kagame's government. The document that raises serious questions. Let's begin with this document. Look carefully at your screen. This is not an opposition document. It is not something produced by a foreign critic of Rwanda. It comes from WASAC, Rwanda's Water and Sanitation Corporation. The document presents a water rationing schedule affecting communities in Kigali. Look at the locations: Gasabo, Kicukiro, Bumbogo, Remera, Kimironko, Rusororo, Jali, Kanombe, Nyarugunga, Masaka, and other communities. We are not talking about remote villages hundreds of kilometers from the capital. We are talking about Kigali, the showcase of Kagame's Rwanda. And that is what makes this story so important. Because Kigali is not simply another Rwandan city. Kigali has become the centerpiece of Rwanda's international image. When foreign journalists arrive, they see Kigali. When international conferences come to Rwanda, they come to Kigali. When foreign dignitaries visit Rwanda, they see Kigali. When Rwanda wants to demonstrate its development achievements to the world, Kigali is the window. But what happens when we look behind that window? Kigali does not have enough water. The problem isn't simply that one neighborhood temporarily lost water. The bigger problem is capacity. Kigali has been growing rapidly. More people, more houses, more apartments, more businesses, more hotels, more construction. All of those people and buildings require water. But water infrastructure must grow alongside the city. When it does not, shortages become inevitable. And this raises an uncomfortable question about Rwanda's development strategy. For years, Kagame's government has concentrated enormous political attention on projects that people can see. Beautiful buildings, convention centers, luxury hotels, sports infrastructure, tourism, international conferences, and global marketing. But underground infrastructure does not receive the same international attention. Nobody flies to Rwanda to photograph a water pipe. Nobody organizes an international conference to admire a reservoir. A water treatment plant does not appear on a tourism advertisement. But for ordinary people, those invisible investments may matter much more than the glamorous ones. Because you cannot drink a convention center, you cannot cook with a stadium, you cannot wash your children with a luxury hotel, and you cannot fill an empty water container with an international advertising campaign. The Visit Rwanda contradiction. And this brings us to one of the biggest contradictions in Rwanda's development model. Rwanda has invested heavily in promoting itself internationally. Millions of football supporters around the world have seen the words, "Visit Rwanda." Rwanda has partnered with Arsenal, it has partnered with Paris Saint-Germain, and it has expanded its football-related international branding through Atletico de Madrid. These are some of the most recognizable football brands in the world. The Rwandan government's argument is understandable. Promote Rwanda, bring tourists, bring investors. Increase tourism revenue, build Rwanda's international reputation. There is nothing inherently wrong with a country promoting itself. Tourism can create jobs. International conferences can generate revenue. Hotels can contribute to economic activity. The problem is not that Rwanda promotes itself. The question is, what comes first? Because before convincing millions of people around the world to visit Rwanda, shouldn't the government make sure the people already living in Rwanda have reliable access to necessities? Water, electricity, affordable food, housing, healthcare, education, jobs. These are not glamorous, but these are the foundations of development. Development for whom? This is the question Rwanda needs to confront. Development for whom? For the tourist arriving at Kigali International Airport? For the international delegate attending a conference? For the businessman staying in a luxury hotel? Or for the mother trying to prepare food for her children? For the worker who needs water before leaving home in the morning? For the family trying to wash clothes? For the small restaurant that cannot operate normally without water? For the ordinary household simply trying to live? Because development looks very different depending on where you stand. From inside a luxury hotel, Kigali can look extraordinary. From inside an international conference center, Rwanda can appear to be racing toward prosperity. From a beautifully landscaped boulevard, the development story can look convincing. But walk into an ordinary neighborhood and ask a different question. When you turn on your tap, does water come out? That question tells us something that skyscrapers cannot. The priorities of Kagame's government. And this is where President Paul Kagame's choices deserve scrutiny. His government has spent years building Rwanda's international brand. Hotels, conference centers, sports facilities, major events, tourism campaigns, international partnerships, football sponsorships, all designed to create the image of a modern, ambitious, and globally connected Rwanda. Again, some of these investments may generate economic returns. That should be acknowledged, but a government also has to decide where its limited resources, borrowing capacity, and political attention should go. And ordinary Rwandans have every right to ask, have the priorities been correct? Imagine applying the same determination used to promote Visit Rwanda to guaranteeing reliable water. Imagine treating water infrastructure as a national prestige project. More treatment facilities, more reservoirs, modern distribution networks, replacement of aging pipes, better maintenance, reduction of water losses, infrastructure capable of supporting Kigali's future population. Imagine the president personally demanding that every neighborhood in the capital have reliable water with the same urgency Rwanda gives to international conferences and major sporting events. That would be development that ordinary citizens could experience every morning. You cannot eat public relations. Another part of this discussion goes beyond water. Rwanda's development cannot simply be measured by what the country looks like. It must also be measured by how people live. Can families afford food? Can households afford electricity? Can young people find decent jobs? Can families find affordable housing? Can people access healthcare? And can they reliably obtain clean water? These questions are fundamental because citizens cannot eat public relations. They cannot drink international praise, and they cannot pay their electricity bills with photographs of beautiful Kigali buildings. A country can have an impressive skyline while many families struggle. Both things can exist at the same time. That is why serious analysis must look beyond appearances. How can Kigali be so clean without enough water? This situation also raises a fascinating question. Kigali is famous internationally for cleanliness. You constantly hear it. Kigali is so clean. Rwanda is so organized. Look at the streets. And yes, Kigali's cleanliness is something many visitors genuinely notice. But maintaining a modern city requires enormous quantities of water. Hotels need water, restaurants need water, offices need water, construction sites need water, public buildings need water, homes need water. So when water becomes scarce, we need transparency about how the available supply is distributed. Which areas receive water first? Which communities experience the longest interruptions? Are wealthy neighborhoods affected in the same way as poorer communities? What about major hotels? And what about government facilities? What about businesses serving international visitors? These are legitimate questions. But we should also be responsible. This rationing notice alone does not prove that government officials or wealthy residents are receiving preferential treatment. Without evidence, we should not present that allegation as fact. What the shortage does prove is that when there is not enough water for everyone, distribution becomes extremely important. and citizens deserve transparency about how that distribution works. The Two Kigalis. Perhaps this story reveals something deeper. There may increasingly be two different images of Kigali. There is the Kigali the world sees, the convention center, luxury hotels, modern streets, international conferences, high-level delegations, tourism campaigns, sports events, visit Rwanda. And then there is the Kigali ordinary residents experience every day. The Kigali of household expenses, food prices, electricity bills, rent, employment, transportation. And now, for some communities, water rationing. One Kigali is designed to be seen. The other Kigali has to be lived. And if Rwanda wants to call itself a development success story, those two realities must eventually become one. The Singapore of Africa? And finally, let's return to that famous comparison. The Singapore of Africa. If Rwanda wants to be compared with Singapore, then the comparison cannot stop with clean streets and modern architecture. Real development requires systems that work. Water, electricity, sanitation, education, healthcare, transportation, productive businesses, good jobs, strong institutions, and rising living standards. That is much harder than constructing beautiful buildings. The real test of Rwanda's development model is not whether Kigali looks impressive in a photograph. It is whether an ordinary citizen benefits from that development. A mother should not care how many international football fans have seen Visit Rwanda if she cannot reliably obtain water for her household. A father struggling with food and electricity costs will not measure development by the number of international conferences Kigali hosts. People measure development through their lives. So this WASAC document may look simple, just a water rationing schedule, but it raises a much bigger question about Kagame's Rwanda. For decades, the government has worked extraordinarily hard to construct an international image of Rwanda as modern, clean, efficient, and rapidly developing. And Rwanda has undoubtedly changed in many visible ways. But visible development is not enough. Hotels are not enough. Conference centers are not enough. Stadiums are not enough. Football partnerships are not enough. Beautiful streets are not enough. A successful country must first deliver the essentials that allow ordinary people to live with dignity. Water, electricity, affordable food, housing, healthcare, education, jobs. Perhaps the biggest question facing Rwanda today is therefore not whether the country has developed. It clearly has in certain areas. The question is whether Kagame's model has put enough emphasis on the kind of development that directly improves the everyday lives of the majority. Because ultimately, development is not what a government tells the world. Development is what citizens experience when they wake up in the morning. And sometimes, the most powerful measure of development is incredibly simple. Turn on the tap. Does water come out? If the answer is no, then no amount of international marketing can make that question disappear. This is Rwanda Digest. If you appreciate analysis that looks beyond the headlines and examines the reality behind Rwanda's international image, subscribe to the channel. And tell us in the comments, should Rwanda spend less on international prestige and branding and more on basic services such as water, electricity, and affordable living?